Thank you for tuning in to In Plain Sight. This is a series that I created through my 3D perspective where I share a very personal account of my experiences that are all too relatable. The commonly hidden struggles that so many people face are addiction, codependency, and the identity barriers that keep us from finding our most authentic expression of the self. Every episode of this series will have some of my memories that I'm sure will sound pretty familiar if you are or have been through these situations. And I parallel them with some helpful information about addiction and codependency that the terrible stigma about it all can really lay a thick mask on. Sadly, most people don't understand addiction, and most people suffering in codependency have no idea. I want to change that. I was able to change it for myself, and I feel like if we were to open our collective eyes to the availability of help, I think that we can make a big difference in recreating the current view and judgment of these all too common challenges that life throws at us. The stigma of it all hurts us in so many more ways than we as a society are willing to admit. It's time to come out with it, to open our eyes, open our ears, and our hearts to the love that covers us all. My name is Desiree, and I'm here to remind you that you're not alone. I certainly am no stranger to this world, and through this series, I will share the lesser known details of my journey to authenticity, sobriety, and really loving who I am. These details are things almost nobody knows. My parents don't, and the rest of my family, probably my friends, and I might have some realizations while retelling it also along the way. My hope is that when you listen in, you'll leave with something that speaks to your heart, whether it's a moment of clarity or a story that mirrors your own. Or maybe it's just here to help you better understand and have more compassion for those that live life with an addiction or that are stuck in codependency. Or maybe to realize your own stuckness in one of those. And occasionally I want to share some of my poetry. It feels right to maybe do that. I write about this stuff kind of a lot, so I feel like maybe it could inspire a new form of self-expression for somebody. So I want to start by painting a picture of what it means to be a high-functioning addict. Addiction is so widely judged, and society often has a narrow image of what an addict really looks like. Remember in DARE class in elementary or middle school? I mean, yeah, the stereotypical addict does exist. They tried to paint that for us and to instill fear in us. But what about the people that don't look like that? The people that dress nicely for work, that have a job, that hold down a job, people that interact with their customers and loved ones without skipping a beat, looking them in the eyes, and they never show the typical signs of addiction. This can be incredibly damaging because it hides the truth from everyone, even ourselves. I certainly did. Addiction plays no favorites. It hides in plain sight, and it steals the person that you are, the person you know, and manipulates your view of reality. And when you no longer recognize who's standing in the mirror, that's when you're finally free to hit rock bottom. But sometimes it doesn't happen right away. Sometimes it's much further out. Starting at the beginning of my journey, I was only 15 when I tried alcohol for the first time. I drank with my parents. I had 3 shots of tequila and I was hammered. It was really fun though, and I felt like it was a really good bonding experience with them. They regretted it immediately, but I don't really blame them for any of this. I'm sure at some point that I used to, but I've come a long way from that. I think that this path was pretty inevitable considering everything I've gone through and come from. It was bound to happen. And I figured this out in hindsight, of course. Anyway, I was also 15 when I started using drugs. I smoked weed for the first time the night before my cousin's funeral with all of my other cousins. That was a really sad day. It was a sad week, year, and then the next year, you never know how to take that. Grieving is such a heavy thing to experience, and everyone handles it so differently. It's actually one of the more common reasons people fall into addiction, trying to cope with the weight of the loss, And they just kind of get stuck there. So Dare Class painted such a weird picture of addiction and what it looks like. It was very stereotypical and highly incorrect, in my opinion. They were wrong about a lot of things, but one thing that they were right about, in my opinion at least, and probably many others, was that weed is the gateway drug. Of course, I refused to think that when I was heavily smoking weed when I was younger and everything, but they were right about it, for me at least. When I smoked that night with my cousins, that was the first time I'd ever done anything like that. And I loved the feeling. It was seriously something that I was looking for probably 2 years at least. I was depressed for a really long time since I was about 13, and I didn't know why. So drugs became my coping mechanism. I know, a terrible one at that, but I still had these other things going for me though. I was on the dance team at school and happily expressing myself through movement, which I did all the time outside of dance. And I was also heavily involved at church at this time. I was a student leader. I played the piano and sang on the worship team. I prayed for people at the end of service, which actually I was really good at. I was really in tune with that type of spirituality and the connection with the divine. I was living this crazy double life where on one side I was attending church on Wednesdays and Sundays and even going on a mission trip to Thailand with the church that summer. I was super innocent on that side. And on the other side, I was a borderline drug addict. I remember one time I was at school just stupid high and I was ditching class because I couldn't be there like that. My eyes were bloodshot and not from weed. And I passed one of my friends from church and he asked me if I was high. And I simply was like, no, you know that I don't smoke. And knowing full well that my eyes were not red from marijuana smoke. I was a mess. I don't think my parents even really know all this, but I went to high school high a lot. I would pop a pill or two that I shouldn't have had and go to class, fall asleep or nod off in class. And then I barely remembered getting home sometimes. Like I'd leave school and then have someone else drive me home or something, and then I'd go straight to bed, which is typical for a teenager. But then I'd wake up and realize, whoa, like I don't remember the last half of my day. Most people would find that pretty scary and immediately put it down. It didn't bother me for some reason, and I just kept it going. I didn't really judge myself too harshly at the time that I knew of. Virgos are pretty good at hiding that. Their self-judgment, they do it without thinking about it. So fast forward to when I was about 20, after going through quite a bit in those 5 years, a few stressful situations and using drugs and alcohol to cope with it, I found myself laying off the drugs for the most part, but I was a full-blown alcoholic in a codependent and abusive relationship. I was harboring a daily hangover and trying to cope with the fact that I let my partner at the time physically abuse me, and it was really unpredictable. So every day I'd have a shot at 6 a.m. before work to cure my hangover. And then after work, I would grab a $6 or $7 bottle of vodka, and there was a 50-50 chance of a fight with my boyfriend at the time. I felt really stuck. But even after I left him, the alcohol use didn't stop. What prompted me to leave was that I had to get stitches in the back of my head. That's what lifted me out of it. I stayed with him for much too long, far too long after he displayed that. And I'm sure I became somebody I didn't know at the time too. I moved back home with my parents, and for almost 2 years, I was super depressed. I didn't have a plan or like a trajectory for my life. I dropped out of high school and I didn't go to college. I didn't know what to do. I don't know how much of this my parents really knew about at that time, but I was being reckless. I put myself in super dangerous situations. I went out alone, downtown, drinking pretty excessively. I gave myself away to people that didn't deserve me. My self-worth was at an all-time low. I just kept using the excuse of, I'm young, let me party. I was 21. I was fresh from a back surgery, and I worked in a smoke shop. So obviously some harder drugs crossed my path more often, like cocaine when I would go out or on a random Saturday at work for some reason. That has become such a weirdly common drug as well. Cocaine is becoming some party drug like alcohol, and it's It's so strange. I don't understand that at all. But I tried whippets at work because I sold them. So like my manager was like, "You've never done this? Well, here, you got to know what you're selling." So they brought me back to the back of the place I worked and gave me one so that I knew what I was selling. It's the dumbest drug ever. Just don't do it. I don't advise it. It's just a waste. Sorry, no offense to anybody who does that. It's stupid. Anyway, psychedelics though have always been a thing for me. I never abuse them. I eat acid and mushrooms and nothing else really. But I always use those spiritually, and they kind of give me a reset for life in general. And when I need that, I know my spirit kind of calls for it, and I will take it at that time and just completely go inside myself. It's really cool, actually. But other than that, I did try heroin for the first time at that job. Like not pain pill, opiates, street heroin. And I loved it, but a little too much, I think. So I never asked for it again. But that wasn't the worst of it yet. Rock bottom tends to be a lot further down than you'd expect. I hadn't reached out for help. Didn't think I needed to. One of the most dangerous side effects of addiction is isolation. Most addicts end up isolating at some point or another, or extended through the entire time that they're in active addiction. I think that I did that. Even though my addiction wasn't active constantly, it was something that I did over time, over the last decade, I guess. I believe some, if not most, of the cause of isolation is some form of shame that's harbored in your use. Although I never really used to directly shame myself, shame is like the lowest on the scale of consciousness, literally, the very bottom. Like we're not supposed to feel that, to feel shame or shame others. But that didn't stop it from creeping up on me. I mean, think about it. Which one comes first? Do you isolate from good connections that you already have because you feel like you might be judged or feel shameful for your use? Or do you see that you have nothing going for you or nothing in common with the people around you, and then you pick up using to cope as a result, and then you feel the shame? Either way, it's difficult to spot, especially when the substance is more widely accepted, like alcohol. In my experience, alcoholics will drink socially, and then in isolation, they drink excessively. And it's pretty sad and very dangerous. Alcohol is one of the only substances that you can actually die from the withdrawal from. There's only two. And definitely you can die from alcohol withdrawal. You can die from the withdrawal from benzodiazepines as well. So like Xanax. And I know Xanax is very popular and people misuse it. It's unbelievable how many people are abusing Xanax. It's crazy. But I understand why. Xanax was something I used to like too. Another common side effect of addiction is dissociation. And this isn't just from the use of dissociative drugs, which is a thing, but anything that you're doing to excess and you're filling your time with, it's a slow fade. And you eventually get to a place that you don't recognize. First, it's your hobbies, the things that make you you. For me, that was dance and church, hanging out with my friends. I cut off a lot of people. Then family gatherings, making excuses not to go to those, or maybe starting fights so that you don't have to. And then your friendships dwindle because maybe you think they'll judge you, like we were saying earlier. Or maybe they will judge you. Maybe you need new friends. Then your job starts to go because you start to slack, or you're late a lot, or you just don't go until you have nothing going for you. And your interactions are surface level with probably pretty shisty people, or people that you could have a good connection with, but nobody wants to really make light of the places that you meet. So everyone just kind of acknowledges that they're there for the same reason. And it's like, all right, word, I got this. We all know why we're here. Nice to meet you. Peace out. And you don't really get to know them at all, just in passing. This is really difficult to deal with. You've dissociated from yourself entirely, and everything that made you you has been left behind and pushed away. And you look in the mirror and you don't know what happened, but you don't even care. This happened to me. And I noticed it when I was like 26, I think. I went to Texas to visit my family that I hadn't seen in literal years. It'd been like 13 years. And I remember laughing like we never skipped a beat. Hanging out with them was so fun. And I realized that I forgot I had a personality. It was strange. I didn't even notice that I had been stripped of it. But this goes back to the codependency thing. This was later on in my life when I had been married for quite some time. And when you're with somebody who doesn't acknowledge those special things about you, or is always tearing you apart, or always angry, you're always having to adjust and walk on eggshells. And you quickly become a shell of yourself, of who you were without even knowing. The loss of identity that's possible there is insane. It takes so much from you. So sad. But addiction takes more. It can take your whole life. As we evolve, it's crucial to break these generational habits and unlock our authenticity so that we can heal ourselves and heal others. This journey is not easy, but stepping into the light is the best decision I ever made. 4 years ago, I began to understand why I had gone through everything that I have. And though it wasn't my rock bottom, everything I experienced was needed. Hopefully, I was able to show you a little bit of why this is so important to me and why I care so much about it. And that'll become more and more apparent as I share my story. So I'll leave this episode here. Next time, I'll continue with some more of the stories of my journey when I finally admit to my problem and hitting rock bottom. Our evolution depends on self-realization, self-love, and the courage to be a light in the dark. We all walk different paths, and some of us face more challenges than others. But whatever it is, you came here to overcome it. You're not here to suffer, I promise. And before I go, I'll leave you with the 3Ds of the 3D perspective. Don't give up. Don't give up on yourself or on somebody that you care about that struggles with addiction. Don't assume that everything's okay when you notice changes in someone. And don't assume that you'll be stuck in this place forever. And finally, don't forget. Don't forget who you are. Don't forget why you're here. And that this is happening for you, not to you. Till next time.